A warm welcome to the Evolution Show. I'm Johan Landgren. I hope you're great. Are we witnessing the beginning of a renaissance for commercial sailing ships? In today's episode, I talk with Niclas Dahl, the leader of Oceanbird, a Swedish company developing the world's largest sailing vessel for freight, with a unique wing sail technology that even can be retrofitted on existing ships. You definitely don't want to miss this episode. And stay tuned for the next episode when Anders Forslund, CEO and founder of Heart Aerospace, a world-leading electric plane developer, is back on the show. We will discuss some exciting news about the 30-seat hybrid electric plane the company is developing. You definitely don't want to miss that. As always, I appreciate a thumbs up and consider subscribing to support the show. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, let's get going. This is the Evolution Show. Welcome to the Evolution Show, Niclas Dahl.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you were on the show, I think, about a year ago, and at the time we sat in my studio. And today you're with me from Stockholm. And yeah, and you are the managing director at Oceanbird, heading a very super exciting project called Oceanbird. And you're developing the world's largest sailing vessel. And you also retrofit existing fleets of vessels with wing sails, a unique wing sail you have developed. But for people that are unfamiliar with you and Oceanbird, can you briefly tell us what you do?
Yes, I mean, we are producing wing sails, and the idea is to do that on every type of ship. So we are working on making use of wind as a propulsion. And it's a wing that is very similar to an airplane wing, with a main and a flap. It's a hard wing sails that you can then put on any type of vessel, basically.
Yeah, and Oceanbird is developing its own vessel that's, as you said, it's tailored for the wind. And the one you're developing on your own that's not retrofitting on existing vessels is called Orcelle Wind. And that is very exciting. It's the world's first wind power RoRo vessel, roll-on, roll-off vessel. And as I understand it, it's planned to enter service 2027. And it will be 217 meters long, 39 meters wide, and have a height of incredible 70 meters. And you can explain that, but that's due to its enormous, the enormous height is due to that you have 6 Oceanbird wings that are standing upright position. So could you tell us about this very exciting vessel?
Yeah, it's a joint project together with Walenius and Walenius Wilhelmson. So they are the one who actually are going to build a vessel and so on. So we are a part into that project to produce and submit the wings for the vessel. So we've been working with that for several years now, and getting closer and closer to actually ordering the vessel.
Yeah, and these wings, it reminds me very much, and I think it's obvious when you look at them, of airplane wings actually. Basically airplanes wings, I mean, to simplify it a little bit, of course, you can explain more in detail, but and as we said, it stands up, and you can have the different number of them, but of course on this dedicated vessel you have 6 of them, so basically you're focusing 100% on, or as much as possible, on a propulsion with wind. Can you explain, I mean, a little bit about the background of the thinking behind these so-called Oceanbird 560 wing sails?
Yeah, I mean, the idea has been to have a fully sailing vessel. I mean, that's where it started and was beginning a research project for several years. And it was the whole Oceanbird concept, or the Orcelle Wind vessel, as you talk about. I mean, there are several things into that, not only wings, but it's also designing the hull, looking into how can we do different speeds and so on. So the idea is then to have it fully sailing. Then you will have, of course, certain times when you cannot sail because you don't have wind. You will have situations when you need to go into port and so on also. So it's not 100%, but when you have good winds and so on, then the idea is to have it 100% sailing, and then you will have otherwise propulsion from an engine also.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was my kind of follow-up question. So, I mean, to what degree is it, using the sails, the wing sails, and to what degree do you have to sometimes, of course, when you come into harbor and so on, or when it's no insufficient wind? Could you say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, we are sailing up to 20 meters per second wind, and when the wind is above that, we take them down for safety reason. So our safety philosophy is then that we take them down. So if you go into stronger winds and so on, then of course that there could be different short routes when it doesn't make sense to bring up the wings because you just go a very short distance, and you need to take them down and so on also. So, but I mean, more than 50% of the savings will come from the wings. That's basically the intention of it. And you can also say, and I mean, one wing would save around 600 tons of fuel every year. So it's a lot of savings because they are, of course, utilizing a lot of fuel otherwise.
Yeah, and on the specific Orcelle Wind vessel, you will have 6 of these wing sails, right?
Yeah, so that's quite enormous saving that you will have from that perspective.
Yeah. And they are able to fold down, as you mentioned, if the wind is too high or if the weather is extreme or for some other reason, you could fold them down, right?
Exactly, and that has been our safety philosophy because we think it's very important that the crew feels safe on board and so on. And if you enter into a heavy storm or something like that, we think that that is the best way to do it, to be able to bring them down. It demands a little bit more on the product because you then need to have safety philosophy that you can always take them down under any circumstances. So the demands on the product becomes a little bit higher when you do that. But as I said, we think it's very, very important, mainly for the crew.
Yeah. So and let's just imagine a typical or trip for this kind of vehicle, for the Orcelle Wind vehicle. If let's say you would go from Gothenburg Harbor or some place and down to Rotterdam or some place like that. How would that work? Would you? I mean, you said you could save 50% approximately average. Would you use some other biofuel, or I mean, what would you use on board the vehicle?
I mean, the vessel itself, what that is the propulsion of that part, that is then decided by Walenius Wilhelmson regarding what kind of fuel they would like to do with the engine, since they are the owner of the. So in our case, what we are doing is to optimize the wings and make sure that we can utilize the wind as much as possible. And here we also then work together with another company called StormGeo in order to check. They are doing routing for vessels. So for sure, that is also a very important part to see how much wind will it be on that. So if you go then from Gothenburg down to Zeebrugge or Rotterdam and so on, you would then look into what is the prognosis for wind and where does it come from, and then we adjust our wing sails accordingly to that.
Yeah. And let's just imagine, because I had a really interesting guest previous here on the Evolution Show, Fridtjof Eidsen from Norway, and he is from a shipping family that goes back 5 generations, and now he started a startup a few years ago, and it's called Zen Oceans, and they are working on a battery solution. Like, you have a container which you can unload or load onto a ship, or they also, like you, developing a dedicated ship with this integrated. But the idea is to go shorter, medium trips. So, like, let's say from Gothenburg to Rotterdam, and maybe stop a few in the harbor, a few harbors, a few stops in between, and then you can lift on a new container, a charged container, and then continue the trip. I know that you focus on the wind, but have you considered some other kind of combination, maybe in the future, that could take you even further without other fuels?
I mean, it's a lot on the agenda right now in order to really work on decarbonization in the industry in general. So it's a lot of different kinds of new fuels, it's batteries and all of that. And I think the wind sails or the wings, they are an enabler for these kind of things going forward. Because what you can say is that for the new types of fuel, they are normally less efficient, so you need more amount of them. Also, batteries is very difficult on these huge ships because you need so much. But if you can then have more and more propulsion from wind, you enable those kind of solutions also in the future. But it's nothing we have been working on at this point. But I see it as an interesting way to go forward to see what are the possibilities with that.
Yeah, I just thought of it particularly because you have a RoRo ship and you unload so many stuff I think pretty practically with you can take on. I saw some videos from Walenius from this RoRo ship you have in their fleet. I think they have 130 vessels and most of them are RoRo ships, and they have huge space and different decks and so on. So I just thought it could be interesting. I understand it's not your focus right now, but it could be something maybe for the future. But it's interesting when you mentioned for me right now up to 20 knots. I think for people to get that in a context, that's quite a lot. I remember that because one of the questions I had for you as well, I thought it could be interesting to discuss it. In the early 1900s, I think even until the 30s, we had actually vessels going from Australia all the way to Europe with wheat, for example, sailing vessels. And at the time they were competing with the steamships. These were niche markets at the time. They couldn't compete everywhere, but longer trips, and they had 15 knots. That's my point. 15 knots of average speed. So I mean, if you have something between 15 or 20 knots on a sailing vessel, you know this much better than me, of course. But I thought that should be sufficient for many trips.
Yeah, I mean, most vessels don't go that fast today. I mean, you talk more about slow steaming, and of course, going less fast is much better for sailing, because the faster you go, the more you will have the wind coming from the bow, which means that it's less efficient. But this is one of the reasons why we selected the wing sails that we have, because what you have with these hard wing sails is that they are very efficient when the wind comes from the bow or from the front. So you can utilize them much more. No wind system likes when the wind comes directly from the front. So this is one of the reasons we sail up to 5 degrees when the wind comes from the bow. But when it's just straight at you, then you need to cross sailing or need to do something if you want to utilize the wings. So in that context, it's more interesting if the vessel can reduce the speed rather than, and most of them today are going 14 knots or something like that. So it's not in our interest to speed up the vessel, but what you can get with the wind or with the wings is, of course, you can select what you would like to use the power, because what we are doing is that we are producing power. If you then have the same propulsion from the engine, your vessel will go faster, or you will reduce the power from your engine, and then you go slower at same speed but utilizing less fuel.
So you can combine it when you have, let's say you have 20% insufficient speed, you could top that, so to speak, with an engine, starting an engine or something.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really smart. And so I was also thinking about, when people see this, they might think, yeah, okay, this sounds great and all, but how about the 60,000 plus commercial vessels already around in the world? How can you work with them? But you have an interesting case that you're working on to retrofit existing vessel. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, we are retrofitting a vessel called Tirana. It's also a Walenius Wilhelmson vessel, one wing sail. That will actually go in dry docking now in May in China. So we will then do all the steel work, all the foundation on that one. And it's one wing that we then put on, and the wing will then go on the vessel later this year or beginning of next year. So now we do all the preparation. So you need to do some kind of reinforcement of the vessel. So that we are doing now when it's in dry docking. But I think this is one of the important part. I mean, if you're really going to change the world and so on, then you also need, as you say, to address the existing fleet that is out there for sure. So this is one first step. And this is also one way for us to go on with the Orcelle Wind project, because we want to take it. I mean, we are now doing the first installation on land down in Landskrona. So we are building up a full-scale wing as we speak right now in Öresund dry dock. Then we will have the first installation on board with one wing sail, and then we can take it to the next step with a fully sailing one. So it's a little bit, you need to learn. First step is to really see, how do we assemble this in a good way, how do we handle it, and then we do one wing and we learn from that, and then we take 6 wings with a fully sailing vessel. So it's a stepwise approach in that way.
Yeah. And I checked out the Tirana. I mean, it's more than 7,000 vehicle RoRo ship. It's not a small vessel, so people understand what kind of a huge project you're working on here. And you said it's going to be one sail, but I mean, have you made any estimates on how much of savings you could potentially make on this ship?
Yeah, I mean, what we can do quite a lot of simulations, because we know the route and we know where it goes, and we know from a history point of view, we know all the winds in that area and so on. So, but you could say on that one, on a favorable route, you would save around 7 to 10%. So when you go over the Atlantic or this part, you would save 7 to 10% in general, which is a lot. For this, I mean, this is an industry that is fighting for every percentage of fuel reduction. So 7 to 10% is a lot, and that's only with one wing.
Yeah, I remember. I have a friend who is from California. He's an inventor, and he has one Guinness record to sail with a huge kite in front of a sailing vessel. And I remember when I read about the kites, they are testing that on oil tankers and so on. And I think they mentioned something like 10-15% of fuel reduction, just having a huge kite in the front when it's optimized and automated and so on. So 10% for just one sailing wing, for me, it sounds a lot as a first step. Yeah. And okay, but so you're retrofitting a RoRo ship, but how about, let's say you have an oil tanker, you have a container ship. This is something you have to obviously test, but you are looking into this, right? So people understand this is something that could be in the future, as you learn, be installed and retrofitted, right?
For sure. I mean, so that is something we are definitely looking into in general. You can say that every type of ship, they have their own challenges and so on. RoRo vessel is quite good in that way that they don't utilize the deck, and they have the bridge at the front, which means that you have no issues regarding line of sight or so on. But there you have the challenges mainly more regarding stability and how do you handle those kind of things. When it comes to an oil tanker or a bulk vessel or different types, they have they are utilizing more the deck, so that is more a challenge in that way. But they have very little stability issues, so that will become no problem at all regarding those things. So there are different challenges that you need to look into and how to handle. But I think what we see in general, I mean, we are not the only company who is working with wind solutions. There are others as well, and the most common vessel type that you're putting them onto is bulk vessels today. And tankers. So that's the most, would be the easiest approach, I would say. So that will definitely be our next step as well.
Yeah. And so, okay, we've talked about tankers, but let's say, I mean, what's the interest been? I mean, when you go to different shows and you tell people and show, I know you have these models and so on, you with the wing sails, and you put them on oil tankers and what have you. What do the companies, the shippers say when they see this solution?
I think we now have passed I mean, from the beginning, it was a little bit to look into, okay, it's a new technology, new way of thinking and so on. So it always takes some time to digest the whole idea. Now there are so many installations in general, I mean, from other companies as well, and we are doing this. So I think we're past the point where will wind play an important role in the future, because that it will for sure. And people are getting more and more interested in this part. And I think, I mean, the marine industry today is an industry in change. You need to do something in order to meet the future legislation coming with that. So I mean, it's not that you can go on as you do today. So either you have to change fuel, or you have to put on wings, or utilizing wind or other things going forward. So otherwise, it's always difficult to sell in new things. But in this case, you have no choice. But then you can also select which direction you would like to go. But to have a hybrid solution with wind and together with other kind of fuels or this, I think most are today very interested in looking into that. So I would be surprised if you don't see wings on more or less every types of ships in the future.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, I mean, this company Oceanbird is a joint venture between Alfa Laval, which is, for people who don't know, it's one of a famous Swedish industrial company. They're famous for their innovation through, I think it's 100 years or something. It's a really old company. And then you have Walenius Wilhelmson, a Norwegian Swedish shipping and logistics company, and they have, I think, as we mentioned, 130 vessels. So they are really into this, and I think, I guess, what I'm aiming at is that Walenius Wilhelmson, I mean, they see a potential in this for the RoRo ships and so on, and to be ahead, I mean, staying ahead of the curve, as we always talk about on this show, it's key. And so I think it's really interesting that you got this kind of backbone and recognition from these companies.
Yeah, it's a very good setup in that way, because I mean, Walenius is the part owner of it, and then of course they have a cooperation with Walenius Wilhelmson and so on. But for both Walenius and Walenius Wilhelmson, they have been working a lot with environmental thinking. I mean, for them this is very, very important to see how we can decarbonize the marine industry and be in the forefront for that part. And it's really good then to have a ship owner as an owner for Oceanbird as a company. And also, as you say, I mean, Alfa Laval, it's the biggest marine component supplier in the world. So they are doing a lot of things, I mean, like separators, ballast systems, heat exchangers for the marine industry. So there we have, of course, a service network around the world. It's also an industrial company where you can also then get the support and help to build up the infrastructure and do that. Because I think this is when you look into the future, I mean, there are a lot of different concepts, there are a lot of different companies coming into this, but the one who can handle the complete part of the package is not only about the product, it's also how can you service it afterwards, how can you get spare parts around the world, and a lot of these things. So the one who has the complete package, and there I think we, with our mother companies, have a very good potential to become that.
Yeah, and something I forgot to ask you is that, I mean, people are talking about AI and automation so much right now, and when I see these wing sails and I see, I mean, the potential for it, I mean, I guess you're looking to work a lot with, you know, data analysis and how to optimize them and automate them and so on, because I guess, I mean, the wind is changing all the time, so a person or a couple of person on board a vessel cannot adapt to that, you know, like that. So can you say anything about how these wing sails are adapting to the wing? What kind of thinking do you have there?
Yeah, no, you're completely right. And if you're going to get this to work, it must be a fully automatic system in that way. So we are not, because you will not have the feeling as you have with your normal sailing boat. You can feel and touch where and see where the wind comes from in the sail and so on. So what we are doing is that we are measuring the wind where it comes. So we have wind sensors on the vessel and on the sail. So we can see where the wind coming from, which direction, and how much it comes. And then we automate it so we position the wing in the right position to generate as much thrust as possible. So it's nothing that the crew need to know about in that way to say, okay, now we need to change the wind and the wing. So this is a fully automatic system. The only thing the crew is doing then is, of course, they decide when they want to have it up or when they want to have it down. And when the wind speed is higher than 20 meters per second, then it automatically go down, because then that's our limit where we see it. But that's a lot of wind. I mean, it's almost a storm when you come into 20 meters.
Oh, yes, I know. Yeah. So, okay, but for me, I think your solution and approach is very interesting. I mean, we should make use much more of wind than we do today, both for small and medium-sized vessels to the enormous ones you're looking at as well. I think Oceanbird's wing sailing technology certainly fits in this category, and I hope to see many Oceanbird sailing vessels out there in the future. So I would like to ask you how you see the future. I mean, if you look in 5 years into the future, where do you think we can see the first fully fledged Oceanbird vessels in operations?
I think we will see them in many different areas and so on. What I would say is that you will most probably see mainly what we call wind assist in the beginning. I mean, 1-2 wing sails and so on to utilize together with an engine. And that I think in 4 or 5 years, you would say most of the vessel having this, I mean, when we talk about new buildings, but also existing vessels. I mean, not to utilize free energy that you have, it would be very, very strange if you don't see the potential in that going forward, in my view.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you so much for this conversation, Niclas. Finally, I'd like to ask you, because I have an upcoming guest, Anders Forslund from Heart Aerospace, and they're focusing on electric airplanes. And of course, they are very much into aerodynamics as well. So I thought I could just ask you, if you like, you could forward a question, if you have one, to Anders in the next episode.
Yeah, I mean, what would be really interesting for me to hear about what he sees as the biggest challenge to develop electrifying airplanes in that way. I can imagine that from doing this, I mean, that is also a new thing going forward, to both from aerodynamic, but also then from convincing people or new technology. So it would be interesting to hear what has been the biggest challenges from doing that from his side.
Yes, definitely. A good question. I will ask him. But again, thank you, Niclas, for this conversation. I hope to have you back in the future to hear what you're doing and have an update. And I wish you all the best with your development.
Thank you very much. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
That was all for today, folks. Share what you think in the comments below. Where do you see the biggest challenges and opportunities with Oceanbird's wing sail technology? And before you go, if you liked the episode, don't forget, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to support the show. In the next episode, I'm joined by Anders Forslund, the CEO and founder of Heart Aerospace, a world-leading electric plane developer, for a super interesting conversation covering exciting news about the 30-seat hybrid electric plane the company is developing. You definitely don't want to miss that. I hope to see you next time.